I never thought my own son would stand by and watch his wife spit in my face, let alone tell me I deserved it. That moment, that vile, wet splatter on my cheek, was the turning point. It was the moment I realized the loving mother I'd been for 62 years had died, and in her place, a woman of cold, unyielding resolve was born. My house, my sanctuary, had become a battleground, and I was done being the victim. Oh, they thought they had won that day, that they had broken me. They had no idea I was just beginning to plot my reclamation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My name is Margaret Williams. I'm a widow, 62 years young, or at least I was, until 6 months ago. My life had settled into a comfortable rhythm after my dear husband Arthur passed a few years back. We had worked hard, saved diligently, and I was finally enjoying the fruits of our labor in our cozy suburban home. Mornings were for gardening, afternoons for my book club or a quiet cup of tea on the porch, evenings for a good mystery novel. It was a peaceful existence, one I truly cherished. Then came the call from my son, David. He and his wife, Jessica, had lost their apartment. Some story about a sudden rent hike, issues with their landlord. Frankly, it sounded like a convenient excuse to me, but what mother says no to her child in need? So I opened my doors and my heart to them. For the first few weeks, I tried to be understanding. Moving is stressful, I know, but weeks turned into months, and their stay transformed into a permanent residency. They contributed nothing, not a single cent towards groceries or utilities. Their days consisted of sleeping until noon, playing video games, and occasionally leaving a trail of dirty dishes and takeout containers in their wake. My home, which had always been a haven of order and quiet, became chaotic and loud. Every suggestion I made, every request for help, was met with a sigh, an eye roll, or a dismissive wave of the hand. Jessica was the worst. She had a way of looking down her nose at me, a constant air of superiority, despite being utterly reliant on my generosity. David, my sweet boy, had become a shadow of his former self, constantly placating Jessica, never standing up for me, always choosing her side. It hurt, a deep, bruising ache in my heart, but I kept telling myself, he's my son. He'll come around. They'll find jobs, they'll grow up. I was wrong. Terribly, foolishly wrong. The incident happened on a Tuesday. I remember it vividly. I had gently asked Jessica if she wouldn't mind putting her coffee cup in the dishwasher instead of leaving it on the counter for the third time that day. It was a small thing, trivial even, but it was the cumulative weight of 6 months of disrespect that made me finally speak up. Jessica, standing by the open refrigerator, whirled around, her eyes blazing. "Are you always going to nag me, Margaret? Honestly, it's just a cup. You're so anal about everything." I felt my cheeks flush. "It's my kitchen, Jessica, and it's about respect." David, who had been engrossed in a game on his phone, finally looked up, annoyance etched on his face. "Mom, just let it go. She'll get to it later." But I couldn't. "No, David, it's always later. It's always me cleaning up after you two. Always me paying for everything. Always me being walked all over." My voice cracked with a lifetime of unspoken frustrations. That's when Jessica snapped, her face contorted with pure contempt. She took the sip of coffee she had just taken, held it in her mouth for a sickening second, and then, with a sneer, she spat it directly onto my face. A warm, bitter splash hit my cheek, some of it dribbling down my chin. I froze, horrified. My hand flew to my face, not to wipe it away, but as if to confirm what had just happened. My daughter-in-law and my home had just spat on me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, agonizing thud. I looked at David, my son, expecting him to be as shocked, as disgusted as I was. But he just stared. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned to me and said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, "You know what, Mom? You probably deserved it." That was it. That was the moment the old Margaret died. The Margaret who made excuses, who hoped, who forgave. She vanished in that instant, replaced by a steely resolve that chilled me to the bone. The burning humiliation, the profound betrayal from my own son, ignited a fire inside me I didn't know I possessed. I wiped the coffee from my face, my hand trembling slightly, but my gaze was steady. I looked at David, then at Jessica, a silence descending that was heavier than any argument. "Get out of my kitchen," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a decree. "Both of you, now." They must have sensed the change, the sudden, unyielding authority in my tone, because for once, they obeyed. They shuffled out, leaving me alone in the desecrated heart of my home. I didn't cry. There were no tears left, just a cold, calculating anger. I walked to my bedroom, locked the door, and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back, not of a defeated old woman, but of someone reborn. "No more," I whispered to myself. "No more. This is my home, my life, and I will reclaim it." I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook from my nightstand, one I usually used for gardening notes. Now it would be my war journal. I started to write, not just about the incident, but about every instance of disrespect, every unpaid bill, every broken promise. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning. They had shown me their true colors, and now it was my turn to show them mine. They would soon learn that a kind heart does not mean a weak will. The very next morning, I was on the phone, not to a friend, not to a relative, but to a lawyer. Thomas Richardson came highly recommended, a specialist in estate planning and, crucially, elder abuse. Our first meeting was brief but incredibly productive. I laid out everything, meticulously recounting the past 6 months, culminating in the spitting incident and David's shocking complicity. Thomas listened patiently, his expression serious. "Mrs. Williams," he said after I finished, "you have a clear case for eviction and potentially grounds for disinheritance, depending on your existing will. More importantly, you have the right to feel safe and respected in your own home." He gave me a sense of validation I desperately needed. We began to strategize. First, a thorough review of my existing will. Second, a plan to legally evict David and Jessica, but not without giving them a chance, a very strict, legally binding chance. And third, a way to recover some of the back rent they owed me, not just financially, but for the profound emotional toll they had exacted. Over the next few days, my house transformed, not physically, but in the air of purpose that now filled it. While David and Jessica continued their usual routine, oblivious to the storm brewing, I was working. I compiled every bank statement, every utility bill, every grocery receipt from the past 6 months. Thomas advised me to change all my bank accounts, ensuring no access for them. He helped me draft a new will, explicitly outlining the conditions for any future inheritance. More subtly, I began to research David's vintage comic book collection. He had brought it with him, boasting about it being his quote, retirement fund, though it had just sat in dusty boxes in the spare room. I remembered him mentioning an old issue of Amazing Fantasy, something about Spider-Man's first appearance. A quick search online, followed by a consultation with an expert Thomas recommended, confirmed my suspicion. That particular issue, Amazing Fantasy number 15, in good condition, was worth a small fortune. It wasn't just a comic book, it was leverage. I decided to unveil my plan in a way that would make an unforgettable statement. I invited them to breakfast on Saturday. I cooked their favorite dishes: pancakes, bacon, eggs, all the works. They arrived at the table, slightly wary, sensing something was amiss. But their greed for free food quickly overcame their caution. They ate heartily, occasionally glancing at me, trying to gauge my mood. The moment they finished, and before they could even think of retreating to their usual activities, the doorbell rang. I had timed it perfectly. "Oh," I said, with a calm smile, "that must be my lawyer." Their jaws dropped. Jessica choked on her coffee. David looked like he'd seen a ghost. Thomas Richardson, a tall, impeccably dressed man, walked in, carrying a briefcase. I introduced him, and he took a seat at the table, radiating quiet authority. "David, Jessica," I began, my voice steady, "we need to discuss your future here." I paused, letting my words sink in. As you know, you've been living here for 6 months without contributing financially or otherwise. That has, unfortunately, accumulated into a significant amount of back rent and expenses." David opened his mouth to protest, but Thomas held up a hand. "Margaret has meticulously documented every expense, David. We have a clear paper trail." He then pulled out a document from his briefcase, a legal notice. "This is an eviction notice, effective immediately unless certain conditions are met." Jessica gasped. "Eviction? Margaret, you can't be serious!" she shrieked. "Where would we go?" "That," I replied, "is entirely up to you, but I am serious. My home, my rules." Then came the kicker. "However," Thomas continued, "Margaret, being your mother, is offering you a conditional agreement. To cover some of the back rent you owe, we've identified an asset of yours, David, your Amazing Fantasy number 15 comic book. Our valuation puts it at approximately $75,000. We propose that it be signed over to Margaret as payment for past dues and as a security deposit for your continued stay under a new, very strict contract." David's face went white. "My comic? No, that's my future," he stammered. "It'll do your future, David," I said, a flicker of cold satisfaction in my eyes. "But it's going towards rent, just like any responsible adult would pay. And if you don't agree, the eviction notice stands, and you'll be out on the street with nothing, and your comic collection too, as it would be considered abandoned property." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Jessica began to whisper frantically to David, but he just sat there, defeated. Faced with immediate homelessness and the loss of his prized possession for nothing, David finally, reluctantly, agreed. Thomas then presented them with a new contract, several pages long. It stipulated everything: rent payments, household chores, respectful behavior towards me, a no snooping clause, and mandatory couples counseling to address their toxic dynamic. It was ironclad, with clear penalties for any violation, including immediate eviction. They signed it, their hands shaking. I watched them, a grim sense of triumph mixing with a profound sadness. This wasn't the way I ever wanted things to be with my son, but they had left me no choice. For a few weeks, things were different. They were compliant, almost unnervingly so. They paid a token amount of rent, did their chores, and even attempted to be civil. They started seeing the counselor, though I doubted their sincerity. I maintained my distance, observing them, always on guard. I knew it was only a matter of time before Jessica's true colors would resurface. And I was right. One afternoon, I came home to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. I always kept it locked, a habit I'd adopted after they moved in. My heart pounded. I pushed it open slowly, and there was Jessica, hunched over my desk, rifling through my financial papers. My blood ran cold. "Jessica!" I exclaimed, my voice sharp. She jumped, startled, scattering documents across the floor. Her face flushed a guilty red. "Margaret, I was just looking for a pen," she stammered, clearly lying. "A pen? In my locked bedroom, going through my private documents?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You violated the contract. You invaded my privacy. This is an immediate breach." Jessica, regaining some of her usual belligerence, straightened up. "Oh, come on, Margaret. It's not a big deal. And besides, I just saw something in here. You're not as poor as you pretend to be, are you? You have investments." "That is none of your concern, Jessica," I replied, picking up the scattered papers. "What's your concern is that you just broke our agreement. And the penalty for that, as you well know, is immediate eviction." David, hearing the commotion, rushed in. "What's going on?" "Your wife," I stated, looking pointedly at him, "just breached our contract by invading my privacy. They need to leave, David. Today." Jessica immediately turned on him. "David, tell her she's being ridiculous. She's got money. She's just being difficult." But something shifted in David that day. Perhaps it was the sight of his wife's blatant disregard for my boundaries. Perhaps it was the impending reality of homelessness. Or perhaps, for the first time, he saw the depth of Jessica's entitlement. He looked from Jessica's furious face to my unwavering, resolved expression. He sagged, defeated, and then, to my astonishment, he finally spoke up. "Jessica, stop! Mom's right. This is her house, and you keep disrespecting her. We need to go." Jessica stared at him, aghast. "What? Go where, David? We have nowhere to go, and we have no money." "We have no money because you sold the car, Jessica," David blurted out, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "And we have $30,000 in credit card debt that you ran up trying to buy things we don't need." "Mom, we're completely broke. I lost my job, and I didn't tell you. I've been faking it." The silence that followed was heavy with revelation. 30,000 in debt, a car sold behind his back, and David out of a job, all hidden from me. It was even worse than I thought. "So," I said, my voice quiet, "you both lied to me, continued to freeload, and Jessica, you continued to snoop around in my private affairs, despite our agreement." David hung his head. Jessica, for once, was speechless, her usual bravado crumbling. "I'm sorry, Mom," David whispered, genuine shame coloring his voice. "I don't know what to do." I looked at them both, truly seeing them for the first time in months. Two adults completely lost, drowning in their own deceit and irresponsibility. "What you're going to do," I said, my voice firm but with a hint of the mother I still was, "is listen. This comfortable home you've been living in isn't funded by magic or by some endless well of inherited wealth, Jessica. Arthur and I worked for every penny. We saved, we invested wisely, we lived within our means. Yes, I'm comfortable. But I am not limitless. I cannot and will not continue to support your irresponsible lifestyle. You are both adults. It's time you started acting like it." The eviction notice stood. They had to leave, but for the first time, David seemed to understand the gravity of their situation, and even Jessica looked utterly terrified. The illusion of my bottomless purse had been shattered, and they were staring into the abyss. Just when I thought my life couldn't get more dramatic, it did. A few days after the eviction, with David and Jessica temporarily staying with a reluctant friend, I received a call from Patricia Sullivan, a financial advisor Thomas had referred me to. She had been consolidating some of my older, more obscure investment accounts. "Mrs. Williams," she said, her voice bright, "I have some rather exciting news for you. It seems your late uncle, George, left you a significant inheritance, completely overlooked in the initial probate, a commercial property in a rapidly developing area, along with an escrow account containing over $2.5 million in accumulated rent and investments." I nearly dropped the phone. $2.5 million? I had no idea my Uncle George, whom I hadn't seen in decades, was so astute. I kept the news to myself for a few days, letting it sink in. It was a staggering amount, a truly life-changing sum. And it made David and Jessica's petty greed seem even more pathetic. Of course, the news eventually filtered through the family grapevine, as good news always does. David and Jessica were back on my doorstep, their eyes gleaming with a new kind of entitlement. "Mom, we heard! Congratulations! This is amazing! $2.5 million! We can finally get back on our feet," Jessica gushed, as if this windfall was a joint victory. "We could even help you manage the property, Margaret. Think of all the money we could make." I looked at them, observing their renewed avarice, and a cold certainty settled over me. "This inheritance," I stated, "is mine. It is not yours. And it is certainly not a solution to your inability to manage your own lives. You still need to prove you can stand on your own 2 feet before you even think about touching a cent of it." Their faces fell, but I could see the wheels turning in Jessica's mind. They wouldn't give up so easily. Thomas Richardson and I were making arrangements for David and Jessica to view some potential, very modest apartments. It was a gesture, a practical step to show them I wasn't leaving them entirely without options, even as they faced the harsh reality of their own limited funds. We were driving back from a particularly depressing showing, a tiny studio with peeling paint and a broken window, when Thomas's phone rang. He listened, his expression growing grim, occasionally interjecting with a, "Yes, I understand," and "Thank you for the update." He hung up, a heavy sigh escaping him. "Margaret," he began, his voice serious, "that was the police. They're investigating Jessica for felony embezzlement. Apparently, she embezzled $50,000 from her previous employer, a small accounting firm, before she lost her job. And David, they're looking into him for unemployment fraud. He claimed benefits while secretly working cash-in-hand jobs. The air in the car thickened. Embezzlement? Unemployment fraud? These weren't just poor life choices. These were criminal acts with serious consequences. I looked at David and Jessica, who had been sitting in the back seat, initially bored by the apartment viewing, now utterly terrified by Thomas's words. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with panic. $50,000? I whispered aghast. "Jessica, is this true?" She couldn't even speak, just nodded, tears welling in her eyes, her bravado completely shattered. David, too, looked utterly broken, his face a mask of shame. The full weight of their actions, the sheer magnitude of their deceit, had finally crashed down on them. They weren't just freeloaders, they were criminals facing jail time. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw genuine remorse in their eyes, not just fear of consequences, but a glimmer of true understanding of how deeply they had wronged me, and how completely they had destroyed their own lives. They weren't just facing homelessness, they were facing prison. David, finally finding his voice, choked out, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. Jessica pressured me, and I just went along with it. Please, Mom, help us. We'll do anything." Jessica, too, was sobbing openly, her defenses utterly demolished. "I didn't mean to, Margaret. I just got in over my head. Please." It was a stark choice. Let them face the full brunt of the law, homeless and friendless, or offer them one last, truly conditional lifeline. The mother in me, buried deep beneath the hurt and anger, stirred. "Anything?" I asked, my voice still firm, but softer than it had been in months. They both nodded, desperate. "All right," I said, "here's the final offer. Thomas will speak to the authorities, explain that you are cooperating and making arrangements for restitution, which will hopefully mitigate some of the charges, but there are no guarantees. You will have 90 days to stay here, under strict rules. In those 90 days, you both will secure legitimate, full-time employment. You will attend financial literacy classes, which I will pay for. You will make concrete plans for restitution for the money you stole, both from Jessica's former employer and the unemployment office. And at the end of those 90 days, you will find and move into your own apartment, completely independent." I paused, letting the weight of those conditions sink in. "And one more thing, I'm establishing a trust fund for future grandchildren. Any inheritance David might receive in the future will be tied to your sustained good behavior and responsible living. This is not about giving you money, it's about providing an incentive for you to build a stable, ethical life. This is your absolute last chance. Prove to me and to yourselves that you can be responsible, contributing members of society, and that you are worthy of being my son and daughter-in-law." They accepted, tears streaming down their faces, but these were tears of genuine relief and, I hoped, sincere commitment. Thomas got to work, negotiating with the authorities. Jessica faced community service and a strict payment plan for the embezzlement, while David received a suspended sentence for the unemployment fraud, contingent on immediate employment and restitution. The next 90 days were tough, but they stuck to it. They found jobs, not glamorous but honest work. They attended every financial literacy class, even bringing home notes and asking me questions about budgeting and saving. They started making small, symbolic payments towards their restitution, a sign of their commitment. They learned to cook, to clean, to manage their time. I watched, cautiously optimistic as they slowly, painfully began to rebuild their lives. At the end of the 90 days, they found a small, affordable apartment of their own. The day they moved out, I helped them pack. There was no resentment, no entitlement, just quiet gratitude and a newfound respect. They hugged me, something they hadn't done in years, and David, my son, looked at me with clear eyes. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we deserved it." 6 months have passed since then. David and Jessica are still in their apartment, both holding down stable jobs. They continue their financial literacy education, they're slowly chipping away at their debts, and they even come over for dinner once a week, bringing a dish they've cooked themselves. The house is peaceful again. I sold the inherited commercial property, securing my own future even more comfortably. And the grandchildren's trust fund is thriving. My relationship with David and Jessica isn't perfect, but it's built on a foundation of honesty, respect, and hard-earned independence. Justice wasn't about revenge in the end. It was about restoring balance, reclaiming my life, and teaching my son and daughter-in-law the hard lessons they needed to learn. I plan to update my will soon, reflecting the new, responsible adults they have become. It took a vile act of betrayal to shake me awake, but sometimes a little tough love is exactly what a family needs to heal. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.